The Hindu Kush Mountains stood silent under a moonless sky, their jagged peaks cutting black silhouettes against distant stars. Lieutenant Commander Sarah Razor Chen pressed her body against the cold rock face, her breath forming small clouds in the frigid air. Below her position, the valley sprawled in darkness, hiding secrets that had brought her SEAL team deep into hostile territory. Razor, we've got movement. 300 meters northwest ridge. The voice crackled softly through her earpiece. Petty Officer Jake Hawk Morrison, her point man, never missed a detail. Sarah adjusted her night vision goggles, scanning the terrain. 5 green thermal signatures moved along the mountain path, their target convoy. Intelligence had been solid. A high-value target, a terrorist financier moving between safe houses, would be in one of those vehicles. This was supposed to be a clean extraction. Get in, grab the target, disappear before anyone knew they were there. Copy that, Hawk. Teams in position. Affirmative. Delta and Charlie teams ready. We're green across the board. Sarah checked her weapon one final time, feeling the familiar weight of her HK-416. 12 years of training, 5 years of combat deployments, and 3 years since she'd broken every barrier to become one of the first women to earn the SEAL Trident. Every mission still carried the same electric tension, the same razor-sharp focus that had earned her the call sign. Execute on my mark, she whispered. 3, 2, 1, mark. Her team moved like ghosts descending the mountain. Years of training made them fluid, synchronized, deadly. The convoy rolled closer, headlights cutting through the darkness. Sarah's team positioned themselves along the ambush point, a narrow section of road where the mountains created a natural funnel. Then everything went wrong. The explosion came from nowhere, a blinding flash that turned night into day. The shockwave hit Sarah like a physical blow, lifting her off her feet. For a terrible, suspended moment, she was airborne, completely weightless. Time seemed to slow. She saw Hawk diving for cover, saw the lead vehicle erupting in flames, saw the cliff edge rushing toward her. She hit the ground hard, her body armor absorbing some impact, but momentum carried her forward. Her hands clawed at rocks, at dirt, at anything. Her fingers found purchase for one precious second, then slipped. She tumbled over the edge. The fall lasted forever and an instant simultaneously. Sarah's body struck an outcropping 15 feet down, the impact catastrophic. She heard the sickening crack before she felt it, both tibias shattering like glass. White-hot agony exploded through her legs, so intense her vision went black at the edges. She rolled, tumbled, struck another ledge, and finally came to rest on a narrow shelf 30 feet below the road. Above, gunfire erupted. Muzzle flashes lit the mountainside like lightning. Her team was engaged heavily. Sarah tried to move, tried to push herself up. Her arms responded, but her legs felt like they belonged to someone else. She looked down and immediately wished she hadn't. Even through her combat pants, she could see the unnatural angles, the swelling already beginning. Razor, Razor, Hawk's voice screamed through her earpiece, desperate and distant. Sarah keyed her mic with trembling fingers. Hawk, I'm alive. 30 feet down, east side, both legs broken, I can't move. Hold on, we're coming for you. But the gunfire above intensified. Sarah heard the distinctive crack of AK-47s, dozens of them. This wasn't the small convoy security force. This was an ambush. They'd been set up. Through waves of pain, Sarah drew her sidearm. If enemy fighters came down after her, she'd make them pay for every inch. She heard boots on rocks above, voices shouting in Pashto. A spotlight beam swept across the cliff face, searching. Razor, we've got at least 40 hostiles. They knew we were coming. Hawk's voice was strained. We're pinned down, can you climb? Sarah tried to pull herself up with her arms. The movement sent such overwhelming pain through her body that she nearly vomited inside her helmet. Negative. Cannot climb. Both legs compound fractures. Get the team out, Hawk. That's an order. Negative. We don't leave people behind. The spotlight found her. Voices above grew excited. Sarah raised her pistol, ready to fight, but rough hands grabbed her from behind. Fighters had rappelled down from another angle. She fired twice, hitting one in the chest, but more swarmed her position. Someone struck her wrist, sending her weapon clattering away. They dragged her up the cliff face, every bump and scrape torture against her shattered legs. Sarah bit through her lip to keep from screaming, tasting blood. At the top, she got her first look at her captors. At least 50 fighters surrounded her team's position. In the center stood a man in expensive combat fatigues, satellite phone in hand, watching with cold amusement. Kadir, the warlord who controlled this region. Intelligence had him marked as brutal, cunning, and always 3 steps ahead. He walked over to where they dumped Sarah on the ground. His boot pressed against her broken leg. Sarah couldn't stop the scream this time. "A woman," Kadir said in perfect English, smiling like a predator. "Even better, a female SEAL. Do you know what propaganda gold you are?" Through the pain, Sarah forced herself to meet his eyes. She saw her team fighting desperately 200 meters away, saw Hawk trying to break through to reach her, saw the impossible odds. "Fall back," she screamed at them. "Hawk, that's a direct order, fall back." She watched Hawk's hesitation, saw the agony of the decision on his face even at this distance. Then smoke grenades popped, covering their retreat. Her team disappeared into the mountain darkness, and Sarah was alone. Kadir crouched beside her, his smile widening. "Your team abandoned you. They won't come back. You're mine now." Sarah's vision blurred with pain, but she managed 4 words that would haunt Kadir in the days to come. "You have no idea." As consciousness faded, one thought burned through the agony. SEALs never quit. Never. They'd broken her legs, but they hadn't broken her. And that would be their fatal mistake. Consciousness returned in fragments. Pain first, a relentless grinding agony that pulsed with every heartbeat. Then cold, bitter, seeping cold from concrete against her back. Finally, awareness. She was no longer on the mountain. Sarah's eyes opened to darkness. Not complete darkness. A sliver of moonlight filtered through a barred window high in the wall, casting pale geometric shadows across her prison. The cell was perhaps 8 feet by 10, bare except for a metal bucket in the corner and the thin mat beneath her body. She tried to sit up and immediately regretted it. Her legs had been treated in the crudest possible way, wooden boards lashed to each leg with rope, no padding, no proper splinting technique. The bindings were too tight, cutting off circulation. Her feet felt distant and cold. Blood had soaked through her combat pants, now dried and stiff. The cell door was solid steel with a small slot at the bottom, no handle on the inside. Sarah took inventory through the haze of pain. No weapons, no gear, no radio. They'd stripped her tactical vest, her helmet, even her boots. She still wore her uniform, though it was torn and filthy with blood and dirt. She forced herself to think like a SEAL, not a victim. Information gathering, that was step 1. The room smelled of mold and human waste. The walls showed water stains, suggesting she was partially underground or in an old structure with poor drainage. Distant sounds filtered through, voices speaking Pashto, the rumble of a generator, vehicles passing occasionally. A compound, then. Probably the same mountain region where she'd been captured. Time was impossible to gauge. Had she been unconscious for hours, days? The answer came with the grinding of metal. The door swung open, flooding the cell with harsh light from battery-powered lanterns. Sarah squinted against the glare. Kadir entered first, followed by another man, tall, educated-looking, wearing Western-style clothing. This second man carried a camera on a tripod. "Good, you're awake," Kadir said, settling into a folding chair his men brought. "I was beginning to worry you died during the night. That would have been disappointing." Sarah said nothing. SEAL training, survival, evasion, resistance, escape played through her mind. She'd endured 3 weeks of simulated captivity during training. This was different. This was real. But the principles remained the same. The educated man set up the camera, the red recording light blinking to life. Kadir smiled at it, then turned back to Sarah. Let me introduce myself properly. I am Commander Kadir and this is Rashid, formerly of Pakistani intelligence before he saw the wisdom of our cause. We're going to have a conversation, you and I, a filmed conversation. Chen, Sarah, Lieutenant Commander, service number 800-895-2847. Her voice came out hoarse but steady. Kadir's smile widened. Yes, yes, name, rank, and serial number. How very traditional, but we're past such formalities, aren't we? Your legs are badly broken. Without proper medical treatment, infection will set in. You'll develop sepsis within days. You'll lose the legs entirely or die screaming in agony. But it doesn't have to be that way. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees, speaking as if offering a reasonable business deal. Tell me about current SEAL operations in this region. Troop numbers, locations, future targets. Simple information and I'll have a real doctor treat your legs. You'll live, possibly even walk again someday. Refuse, and you'll rot in this cell while your body destroys itself. Sarah met his eyes without flinching. Chen, Sarah, Lieutenant Commander, service number 800-895-2847. Something flickered across Kadir's face, annoyance, perhaps respect. You think you're strong. You think your training prepared you for this. I've broken dozens of prisoners, Miss Chen. Soldiers, spies, even ones who believed they were unbreakable. Pain is a universal language and everyone has their breaking point. Chen, Sarah, Lieutenant Commander. The backhand came fast, snapping her head to the side. Stars exploded across her vision. Before she could recover, Kadir's boot pressed down on her broken left leg, not hard enough to cause new damage, but enough to send lightning bolts of agony through her nervous system. Sarah screamed. She couldn't help it. The pain was too intense, too overwhelming. But even as the scream tore from her throat, she forced her mouth shut, biting down until she tasted blood again. Kadir removed his boot, waiting for her breathing to steady. You see, pain cuts through all that training, all that pride. Now, shall we try again? Or would you like to experience what real pressure feels like? Sarah's vision swam with tears, but her voice emerged as a ragged whisper. Chen, Sarah, Lieutenant Commander, 800-895-2847. For the first time, genuine anger crossed Kadir's face. He stood abruptly, packing the small cell like a caged predator. Rashid spoke quietly in Pashto and Kadir responded sharply. An argument, though Sarah couldn't understand the words. Finally, Kadir turned back to the camera. Let me tell you what's going to happen, Miss Chen. This footage will be edited, distributed. The world will see America's elite female warrior broken and helpless in a cave. Your government will be embarrassed. Your military will be humiliated. And you will become proof that women have no place among warriors. He gestured to his men. No food for 3 days. Water only, enough to keep her alive. We'll see how strong she feels when hunger joins the pain. As they filed out, Rashid paused at the door. He glanced back at Sarah, and for just a moment, something human flickered in his eyes. Then the door slammed shut, and darkness returned. Sarah lay in the blackness, her legs throbbing with every heartbeat. The fever was already starting. She could feel the unnatural heat building in her body, the first sign of infection taking hold. Kadir was right about one thing. Without treatment, she had perhaps a week before sepsis killed her. But SEALs didn't survive by hopping for rescue. They survived by taking action. Sarah turned her head toward the sliver of moonlight, her mind already working. The door had a weakness. She'd heard it in the way the hinges groaned. The wooden splints on her legs were crude, but wood could be broken, could be sharpened. And Rashid, that momentary hesitation, that flicker of humanity, that was a crack in their armor. Seer training had taught her that captivity was a battle of wills. Kadir saw her broken legs and assumed a broken spirit. He saw a victim. That was his mistake. Not broken, Sarah whispered to the darkness, the words a promise to herself. Never broken. Outside her cell, guards laughed and talked. Somewhere, a generator coughed and rumbled. And Sarah Chen, Navy SEAL, began to plan her survival. Because quitting wasn't in her vocabulary. Surrender wasn't in her DNA. And anyone who thought broken bones meant defeat had never faced the determination of a warrior who'd fought too hard, sacrificed too much, and overcome too many obstacles to give up now. The interrogation had just begun, but so had her resistance. And in that cold cell, despite the pain, despite the odds, a dangerous smile crossed Sarah's face. Kadir had made a critical error. He'd left her alive. That would prove to be his undoing. Day 3 of captivity. Or was it day 4? Time blurred in the darkness, marked only by the slot in the door opening twice daily, once for a cup of murky water, once for a piece of stale flatbread. True to his word, Kadir had offered no medical treatment, no relief from the constant agony radiating from her shattered legs. But he'd also made his first mistake. He'd underestimated her. Sarah had spent 72 hours doing what SEALs did best, observing, analyzing, planning. Every sound became data. Every glimpse through the door slot became intelligence. The compound operated on predictable rhythms, and predictability meant vulnerability. Guard change happened every 4 hours precisely. She'd counted the footsteps, memorized the voices. 6 different guards rotated through shifts. Morning shift, 2 guards, younger, less disciplined, often talking instead of watching. Afternoon, 3 guards, more professional. Night, 1 guard, older, who paced constantly but followed the same route every time. The hinges on her door were rusted. Western side hung lower than eastern, she'd noticed when they dragged her inside. The lock was old, probably Soviet-era, single tumbler mechanism. Not sophisticated, just solid. But solid didn't mean impenetrable. During her second night, while fever dreams made her shiver and sweat simultaneously, Sarah had discovered something precious. Running her fingers along the wall near her sleeping mat, she'd found it. A thin piece of metal, perhaps 2 inches long, jagged at one end. Part of an old bed frame or support beam, broken off and forgotten. To her captors, it was nothing. To Sarah, it was hope. She'd hidden it immediately, working it into a seam in her remaining boot sole. Every night since, while infection raged through her body and pain threatened to overwhelm her consciousness, she'd practiced. Fingering the metal piece, memorizing its shape, imagining how it would need to bend, how it would need to fit into that lock mechanism. But lockpicking meant nothing if she couldn't move. That was the second problem she'd been solving. Her legs were useless, that was medical fact. Both tibias fractured, the right one compound, bone fragments probably floating in swollen tissue. Without surgery, without proper setting, they'd never heal correctly. Walking was impossible. Walking, however, wasn't the only way to move. During the brief minutes when guards delivered her meager rations, Sarah had remained perfectly still, playing the role of defeated captive. But in darkness she worked. Core strength exercises, isometric holds that made no sound, created no movement visible to anyone watching through the door slot. Plank position, holding herself rigid on her forearms and one good knee, keeping her broken legs elevated and still. 30 seconds at first. Now she could manage 3 minutes before the pain forced her down. Her arms were her legs now. She'd practiced dragging herself across the cell floor using only upper body strength, moving inches at a time, mapping every crack in the concrete, every irregularity. 8 feet from door to back wall, 4 feet wide. These dimensions were burned into her muscle memory now. The compound itself was revealing its secrets too. Vehicle sounds told stories. 3 trucks, 1 larger transport, all diesel. They departed before dawn, returned after sunset. Supply runs, probably to a larger town. The generator ran continuously except for a 2-hour window around midnight when someone shut it down to conserve fuel. During those hours, the compound went dark except for battery-powered lights. Voices filtered through her cell walls at odd hours. Rashid's educated tones, Kadir's harsh commands, and others. At least 15 fighters based on distinct voices, possibly 20. Not insurmountable odds for a full SEAL team, for one woman with broken legs. Suicide. But suicide wasn't the plan. Survival was. On the third night, Rashid came alone. No camera, no Kadir. Just the former intelligence officer with a medical kit that looked pathetically inadequate. "I'm going to check your legs," he said in accented English, kneeling beside her. "Commander Kadir doesn't need to know." Sarah watched him carefully, saying nothing. Trust was a luxury she couldn't afford, but information was currency. Rashid unwrapped the crude splints, and even in the dim light the damage was obvious. Her legs had swollen to nearly twice normal size, skin stretched tight and discolored. The smell of infection was unmistakable, sweet and rotten simultaneously. "This is very bad," Rashid muttered, pulling out antiseptic and clean bandages from his kit. "You need hospital surgery. Without it," he trailed off, not needing to finish the sentence. "Why?" Sarah asked, her first word to him beyond the required name, rank, and number. Rashid's hands paused in their work. "Why what? Why help me? Why risk Kadir's anger?" For a long moment he didn't answer, focusing intently on cleaning the wounds as gently as possible. The antiseptic burned like liquid fire, but Sarah didn't flinch. Finally, Rashid spoke, his voice barely above a whisper. "I was intelligence officer, educated man. I interrogated people with words, with psychology. Then Kadir's people came to my city. They killed those who resisted, recruited those who were useful. I had choice, join or watch my sister die." He met her eyes. "I chose poorly. Every day since I choose poorly. Perhaps helping you is choosing correctly just once." Sarah processed this, reading the truth in his face. Rashid wasn't an ally, not really. He was a trapped man making small rebellions against his own captivity. Useful but unreliable. "The antibiotics will help," he continued, injecting her with a syringe, "but only for short time. Week, maybe less, you understand." "I understand." Rashid rewrapped her legs, this time with proper technique, adding padding to prevent circulation loss. As he worked, Sarah asked casual questions, her voice weak enough to seem non-threatening. How many men guarded the compound? Where was the armory? What was the layout of the buildings? Rashid answered some questions, deflected others, but every answer was another piece of the puzzle. As he prepared to leave, Sarah stopped him with a question. "The weak point in your security, you know where it is, don't you?" Rashid froze at the door. For 3 heartbeats he didn't move. Then, without turning around, he spoke so quietly she almost missed it. "Eastern wall, gap between guard towers, 15 feet of dead space, no cameras. Used to be watchtower there but collapsed in earthquake 2 years ago. Never rebuilt." He paused. "But even if you reach it, you cannot walk, cannot climb, cannot escape." The door closed behind him, leaving Sarah in darkness once more. She smiled. Rashid had just told her the what. Now she needed to figure out the how. Sarah pulled the metal piece from her boot, feeling its weight in her palm. A lockpick, a weapon, a tool. It was all 3 and none of them. What she needed was creativity, the kind of problem-solving that had gotten her through Hell Week, through the impossible standards that said women couldn't be SEALs, through every obstacle that had tried to break her. Broken legs meant she couldn't walk. Fine, she'd crawl, couldn't run, she'd drag herself. Couldn't fight standing, she'd fight from the ground. 8,000 miles away, in a secure facility in Virginia, Master Chief Dalton Bull Richard sat in a windowless room, staring at satellite imagery that officially didn't exist. 3 men sat with him, Hawk Morrison and 2 others from Sarah's original team. "Sir, with respect, we've been ordered to stand down," one of them said carefully. Richards didn't look up from the images. "I didn't hear an order. Did you boys hear an order?" "No, Master Chief, didn't hear a thing." "Good, because we've got a problem. Razor's GPS tracker went dead 72 hours ago, but before it did I got a location, right here." He tapped the screen. Mountain compound, heavily fortified. Intel says it belongs to Kadir. That's a suicide mission, Chief. Maybe 20 hostiles, unknown layout, and we don't even know if she's still alive. Richards finally looked up, his eyes hard as flint. She's alive. Razor doesn't quit, and neither do we. We've got 48 hours to plan an insertion that doesn't officially exist. Anyone want out, doors right there. Nobody moved. Good, Richards said. Let's bring our girl home. Back in her cell, Sarah had no idea rescue was being planned. She only knew one truth: waiting for salvation was a death sentence. Freedom would come from her own hands, or it wouldn't come at all. She began working the metal piece against the concrete floor, slowly sharpening one edge. The sound was barely audible, masked by the generator's rumble. Kadir thought he'd captured a helpless victim. He thought broken legs meant broken spirit. That was his fatal mistake, confusing physical damage with mental defeat. Sarah Razor Chen had spent her entire career proving people wrong about what she could do. This would be no different. The escape clock was ticking. 1 week before infection killed her. 1 week to accomplish the impossible. She'd faced worse odds before. Night 5. The lock clicked open with a sound so soft Sarah barely heard it herself. Her hands trembled, partly from fever, partly from the adrenaline surge of success. 3 nights of practice, fingers bleeding from manipulating the sharpened metal piece, and finally the ancient Soviet lock surrendered its secrets. The door remained closed. Sarah didn't move it yet. This was reconnaissance only, proving she could escape when the moment came. She eased the lock back into place, the click of success echoing in the darkness. Phase 1 complete. Now came the hard part: movement. Sarah had spent the past 2 days preparing her body for what came next. The antibiotics Rashid smuggled had bought her time, pushing back the infection's advance, but fever still spiked at night, making her shake uncontrollably. She'd used those fever dreams productively, visualizing every movement, every technique that might work with useless legs. She'd found her answer in an unexpected memory: advanced combat life-saving training, the fireman's carry techniques modified for self-rescue. If she could lift a 200-pound man, she could drag her own body weight. From her broken bed frame, Sarah had extracted 2 longer pieces of wood during the previous night, each piece roughly 18 inches long, relatively straight. She'd wrapped them with strips torn from her undershirt, creating crude padding. Not crutches. Her legs couldn't bear any weight, but something better: mobility aids. At 200 hours, when the generator shut down for its nightly fuel conservation, Sarah made her first real attempt. The compound plunged into darkness except for scattered battery lanterns. Perfect. She picked the lock again, this time pushing the door open an inch. Cool night air rushed in, carrying the scent of diesel fuel and cooking fires. Sarah positioned her makeshift aids, one under each armpit, extending down to support her weight on her forearms and upper arms, like inverse crutches, bearing weight on her upper body instead of her feet. The first movement was agony. Even with her legs carefully immobilized in Rashid's improved splints, the shift in position sent white-hot pain screaming through her nervous system. Sarah bit down on the cloth strip she'd prepared, stifling the scream that wanted to escape. Slowly, agonizingly, she dragged herself forward, arms taking her full weight, core muscles engaged to keep her body rigid, broken legs trailing behind like dead weight. 6 inches. Rest. Breathe through the pain. 6 more inches. The doorway seemed miles away, though it was only 8 feet. 15 minutes later, Sarah reached the threshold. Sweat poured down her face despite the cold mountain air. Her arms trembled with exhaustion, but she was outside her cell for the first time in 5 days. The corridor was narrow, carved from rock, probably a natural cave system that had been expanded and reinforced. 20 feet long, it ended in a junction. Battery-powered emergency lights cast deep shadows. To her left, she heard snoring guard quarters. To her right, the corridor continued into darkness. Sarah chose right. Movement was impossibly slow. Every foot took minutes. She had to stop frequently, listening for footsteps, for voices, for any sign she'd been detected. The night guard would make his rounds eventually. She timed his pattern at 12-minute intervals. That gave her perhaps 8 minutes before his next pass. The corridor opened into a larger space, some kind of storage area. Sarah's eyes, adjusted to darkness, picked out details. Crates stamped with Cyrillic lettering, probably ammunition, fuel cans, boxes of supplies, and in the corner exactly what she'd hoped to find: a detailed map tacked to the wall, marked with positions and patrol routes. She couldn't risk using a light, but the moonlight filtering through a high-ventilation grate was enough. Sarah committed the layout to memory with the same precision she'd used memorizing mission briefings. The compound was larger than she'd estimated, 3 main buildings arranged in a triangular formation. Her cell was in the eastern building, partially underground. The western building housed Kadir's command center and living quarters. The northern structure was the armory and garage. The gap Rashid had mentioned, the 15-foot dead space in the eastern wall, was marked clearly on the map. Her mind calculated distances, angles, obstacles. From her cell to that gap, approximately 120 meters. For a person who could run, 90 seconds. For her, dragging herself with broken legs, hours maybe. Footsteps echoed in the distance, the guard making his rounds early. Sarah turned, using her aids to reverse direction. The pain had become a constant companion now, a screaming background noise she'd learned to compartmentalize. Her SEAL training had taught her that pain was just information. Acknowledge it, then ignore it. She made it back to her cell with 30 seconds to spare, closing and locking the door from the inside just as the guard's footsteps approached. Through the door slot, she watched his shadow pass, heard him pause, then continue. He hadn't noticed anything amiss. Sarah collapsed on her mat, arms burning, whole body shaking with exertion and fever. But she'd done it. She'd mapped the corridor, seen the compound layout, proven she could move. Over the next 2 nights, she pushed further each time. The second night, she reached the junction with the main corridor, discovering the back entrance to the compound, a heavy metal door that required a key card. No good for escape, but valuable information. The third night was when everything changed. Sarah had just turned back from another reconnaissance push when she heard it, a young voice, speaking Pashto in the storage room. She froze, pressing herself against the wall's shadow. A teenager emerged from behind the supply crates, arms loaded with bread and dried meat. He couldn't have been more than 16, thin and scared-looking. He moved toward the corridor leading to the guard quarters, then stopped, turning directly toward Sarah's hiding spot. Their eyes met. For 3 eternal seconds, neither moved. Sarah's hand instinctively went to the sharpened metal piece tucked in her waistband, her only weapon. The boy's eyes went wide, taking in her broken legs, her makeshift mobility aids, the desperation in her face. He should have screamed, should have raised the alarm. Instead, he did something unexpected. He set down the food he was carrying and held up both hands in a gesture of peace. Then, in heavily accented English, he whispered 4 words that changed everything. "I can help you." Sarah's mind raced. Trap, trick, or genuine offer. Every instinct screamed caution, but she was running out of time. The infection was winning despite the antibiotics. Her window for escape was closing. "Why?" she whispered back. The boy's face hardened with an anger that seemed too old for his young features. "Kadir killed my family, destroyed my village. I am, prisoner like you, just different cell." "What's your name?" "Amir." Sarah studied him, reading body language, facial expressions, all the micro-signals her training had taught her to recognize. Fear, yes. Anger, absolutely. Deception, she didn't think so. "I'm Sarah." Amir nodded, glancing nervously toward the guard quarters. "We cannot talk now. Tomorrow night, same time. I bring medicine information. Yes." Every tactical instinct told Sarah this was a risk. But tactics also meant adapting, using available assets, taking calculated gambles. "Yes," she agreed. Amir grabbed his supplies and disappeared into the darkness. Sarah dragged herself back to her cell, mind spinning with possibilities and dangers. She'd survived 5 days of captivity. She'd learned to move despite broken legs. She'd mapped the enemy's position. And now, possibly, she had an ally. Or she'd just signed her own death warrant. Back in her cell, Sarah closed her eyes but couldn't sleep. Somewhere out there, Kadir was planning his propaganda victory. Somewhere further away, her team, if they'd survived, would be continuing their mission or already extracted home. She was alone, except possibly she wasn't. Sarah pulled out her metal piece, testing its sharpness against her thumb, sharp enough to pick locks, sharp enough to fight if needed. 1 week, she whispered to the darkness, making a promise to herself. 7 days to get out of here or die trying. The clock was ticking, the infection was spreading, and Sarah Razor Chen was done being a victim. Tomorrow night, she'd meet with Amir and find out if he was salvation or betrayal. Either way, she was moving forward, because SEALs didn't wait for rescue. They made their own miracles. Night 6. Amir returned exactly when he'd promised, materializing from the shadows like a ghost. This time he carried a canvas bag, bulging with supplies. Sarah had positioned herself in the storage room, her makeshift aids allowing her to sit upright against a crate, conserving energy while maintaining readiness to move. "You came back," Sarah whispered, surprised despite herself. "I said I would." Amir settled across from her, keeping his voice low. From the bag, he produced items that made Sarah's heart race, actual medical supplies. Real antibiotics, not the limited doses Rashid had provided. Antiseptic, clean bandages, even morphine ampules. "Where did you get these?" "Kadir has medical supplies for his men. He does not count carefully." Amir's young face held a bitter smile. "He thinks I am stupid boy, good only for carrying things. This is useful." Sarah watched him work, unwrapping her legs with surprisingly gentle hands. The infection had spread despite Rashid's earlier treatment, angry red streaks radiating from the fracture sites, the skin hot to the touch. Without hospital-grade intervention, she had days at best. "This is very bad," Amir said, echoing Rashid's earlier assessment. He cleaned the wounds with antiseptic, his jaw tight. "You need surgery." "I need escape. Surgery comes after." Sarah studied the boy carefully. "Why are you really helping me, Amir? The truth." Amir's hands stilled. In the dim light, his eyes seemed much older than his years. "You want truth? Kadir came to my village 18 months ago. We had nothing he wanted, just farmers, just families. But we were in territory he claimed. My father spoke against him at village meeting, said we would not pay his taxes, would not give our sons to his army." His voice dropped to barely audible. "Kadir made example. He gathered everyone in village square, made us watch as his men killed my father, my 2 brothers, my uncle. Then he burned our homes, took me because I was young, could work, took other boys too. Some of us are here, some at his other compounds. We are slaves, but he calls us servants to feel less guilty." Sarah felt the familiar rage building, the same anger that had driven her through Bud-S training when instructors said women couldn't hack it, the same fire that burned when anyone preyed on the innocent. And the others, the boys he took. Some died, some escaped. 3 of us remain here. Jamal works in kitchen, Omar in motor pool. We plan escape many times, but Amir gestured at the compound around them. "Where do we go? Mountains are dangerous. Kadir has men in every village. We are children, alone we die." "But with me." Amir's eyes met hers with startling intensity. "With you maybe we have chance. You are warrior, you know things we do not." And, he hesitated, If we help you escape, if you reach your people, maybe you help us too. Maybe you destroy Kadir. There it was, the real motivation. Not just escape, but revenge. Sarah understood that drive intimately. It was dangerous, could cloud judgment, but properly channeled, it was also powerful fuel. Tell me about the compound, Sarah said. Everything you know. Over the next 30 minutes, Amir painted a detailed picture. 22 fighters currently in residence, though numbers fluctuated. Thursday mornings, a supply convoy arrived from the nearest town, 3 hours away by mountain roads. During the convoy's arrival, most guards focused on the main gate, inspecting vehicles, unloading supplies. The eastern wall gap Rashid had mentioned. Amir confirmed it, adding crucial detail. The collapsed watchtower's rubble provided cover, and the wall itself was only 8 feet high at that point, damaged from the earthquake. But even if you reach wall, how do you climb with broken legs? Amir asked practically. I don't, Sarah said simply. I go under. Is there drainage, sewage system? Amir's eyes widened. Yes, old Soviet construction. Drainage pipe runs under eastern wall, opens to ravine outside, but pipe is small, maybe this wide. He gestured, perhaps 2 feet in diameter. I can fit, I have to fit. The pipe has metal grate on both ends, locked. Sarah pulled out her sharpened metal piece, showing Amir. Not a problem. What about your friends, Jamal and Omar? Can we trust them? With our lives, we are brothers now, all we have left. Then here's what we do, Sarah said, her tactical mind assembling a plan from impossible pieces. Thursday morning, during the supply convoy chaos, you 3 create additional distractions, small ones, spread throughout the compound. Nothing obvious enough to seem coordinated, just enough to fragment guard attention. A small fire in the kitchen. A vehicle accidentally blocking the motor pool exit. Anything to create confusion. And you? I make my way to that drainage pipe. Once I'm outside the compound, I head for the rally point. Where's the nearest town with U.S. or Allied presence? Amir thought carefully. There is Pakistani military outpost, maybe 15 kilometers north, through the mountains. 15 kilometers. In her condition, it might as well be 1,500. But Sarah had crawled through worse during Hell Week. Okay, not with 2 broken legs, but the principle remained. Pain was temporary. Quitting was forever. I need a map, detailed as possible. I can draw one. I know these mountains, grew up here. Good. Also need timeline, exact schedule for Thursday convoy, guard positions during unloading. And Amir, Sarah fixed him with her command stare. After you create your distractions, you 3 disappear. Don't try to follow me, don't wait around. Get yourselves to safety. Understood? No, Amir's voice was firm. We stay until you are clear. If guards discover you escaping, we create bigger distraction. Give you time. That's suicide. Maybe, but sitting here, waiting for Kadir to decide, we are more useful dead than alive. Also suicide. At least this way we choose. The steel in his young voice reminded Sarah of junior SEALs she'd trained, terrified but determined. You're brave, kid, stupid but brave. Amir actually smiled. You are woman with 2 broken legs planning to crawl through mountains. Who is stupid one? Fair point. They talked for another hour, refining details. Amir would smuggle supplies over the next 2 nights, water bottles, energy bars he could steal from the kitchen, a better map. He'd coordinate with Jamal and Omar, brief them on the plan. Thursday was 3 days away, 72 hours to prepare. As Amir prepared to leave, Sarah caught his arm. Listen to me carefully. When this goes down, things will get violent. Kadir won't let me leave without a fight. If shooting starts, you run. Don't be a hero, just survive. Can you promise me that? Amir was quiet for a long moment. I promise to do my best. That is all any of us can promise, yes. After he vanished into the shadows, Sarah made her painful journey back to her cell. Her body screamed for rest, but her mind raced with tactical calculations. The plan had maybe a 30% chance of success, terrible odds by any standard, but 30% was better than zero. She thought about Master Chief Richards, about Hawk and the team. Were they safe? Had they made it back to base? Part of her hoped they'd followed orders and moved on. Another part, the part that knew her team, suspected they were doing something spectacularly unauthorized right about now. 8,000 miles away, her suspicions were correct. Richards and 3 operators had crossed into hostile territory 12 hours earlier, traveling light and fast, using civilian vehicles and local disguises. They'd reached a village 6 kilometers from Kadir's compound and were currently setting up surveillance, watching through high-powered optics. Movement on the eastern wall, Hawk reported, peering through a scope. Guard pattern confirms intel. They're sloppy. Good, Richards growled. Sloppy gets people killed, in this case them. We move tomorrow night, extraction by force, full breach protocol. Chief, even with surprise, we're talking 20+ hostiles, 4 of us. Then we'd better be really fucking good at our jobs, hadn't we? Back in her cell, Sarah had no idea rescue was 48 hours out. She was operating on the assumption she was completely alone, which meant the escape plan had to work with just her resources and 3 brave teenagers. She administered the morphine Amir had brought, feeling the pain recede for the first time in days. It wouldn't last. Morphine was for emergency use only, and she needed to stay sharp. But for tonight, she could rest without agony screaming through every nerve. As she drifted toward sleep, Sarah's mind fixed on one thought: Thursday, 3 days. Get to the drainage pipe, get outside the walls, crawl 15 kilometers to safety. Simple, impossible, absolutely insane. Exactly the kind of mission SEALs lived for. Thursday, she whispered to the darkness. Either freedom or death, no third option. Somewhere in the compound, Amir was briefing Jamal and Omar on their role in the most desperate escape attempt any of them would ever make. Somewhere in the mountains, Master Chief Richards was planning a rescue that violated every order he'd received. And in a cold cell, Lieutenant Commander Sarah Razor Chen closed her eyes, a warrior preparing for battle despite broken bones and impossible odds. The clock was ticking. Thursday was coming. And hell was coming with it. Thursday morning arrived with the rumble of diesel engines echoing through the mountain valley. Sarah woke to the sound, her heart immediately accelerating. This was it. Freedom or death. No turning back. She'd spent the previous 2 nights preparing. Amir had delivered everything promised. A detailed hand-drawn map of the mountain routes to the Pakistani outpost, 6 water bottles, protein bars wrapped in cloth, and most crucially, a small hacksaw blade he'd stolen from the motor pool. The drainage grate wouldn't stand a chance. Sarah strapped the supplies to her body using strips of cloth, creating a makeshift harness that would allow her to drag everything while keeping her hands free. She'd practiced the movement pattern 50 times in her cell, army crawl modified for useless legs, using elbows and core strength to pull herself forward. Painfully slow, but functional. The morphine was gone. She'd used the last dose the previous night to sleep. Now, clear-headed and running on pure adrenaline, she picked the cell lock one final time. 800 hours. The supply convoy would arrive at 8:30. Amir had confirmed the timing last night with a whispered message through her door slot. We are ready. Allah protect you. Sarah dragged herself into the corridor. The compound was already showing signs of increased activity, voices shouting orders, boots crunching on gravel, the organized chaos of convoy preparation. Perfect cover. She moved faster than ever before, ignoring the pain that screamed through her legs with each pull forward. The storage room. The junction corridor. Left turn toward the compound's rear section. Every meter felt like a kilometer, but her SEAL training had prepared her for this. The grinding endurance. The ability to push through when every cell in your body begged to quit. Halfway to the drainage access point, she heard it. Jamal's distraction. A crash from the kitchen, followed by shouting in Pashto, something about a grease fire. Guards' footsteps pounded past her hiding spot behind a stack of crates, running toward the commotion. Sarah kept moving. The drainage access was in a small alcove beneath the eastern building, covered by a wooden panel. She'd memorized the location from Amir's descriptions. 50 meters, 40, 30. Another distraction, this time from the motor pool. Omar's work. An engine revving wildly, then the crunch of metal on metal. More shouting. More guards diverted. 20 meters. Then the supply convoy arrived, its timing perfect. The main gate ground open with a metallic screech. Kadir's voice boomed over the chaos, demanding order. Sarah could picture it, guards rushing to inspect vehicles, others responding to the kitchen fire and motor pool accident, attention fragmented in exactly the way she'd planned. 10 meters. Sarah reached the alcove just as the wooden panel lifted from the inside. Amir's face appeared, eyes wide with fear and determination. Quickly, they are distracted but not for long. He helped her through the opening into a narrow space that reeked of mold and stagnant water. The drainage pipe entrance gaped before her, a dark circular maw perhaps 20 inches in diameter, just as Amir had described. The metal grate lay beside it, already cut away. "You did this?" Sarah asked. "Last night, very quiet, very slow." Amir pressed a small flashlight into her hand. 15 kilometers north. Stay in the ravines, avoid the roads. Pakistani outpost has blue flag on the tallest building. You cannot miss it. "What about you three?" "We leave now, different direction. Go to my cousin's village west in the mountains. We will be safe." He paused, then gripped her shoulder. "You are bravest person I have ever met. Destroy Kadir for us, please." "Count on it." Sarah squeezed into the drainage pipe head first, dragging her broken legs behind her. The space was impossibly tight. She had to exhale completely to fit her shoulders through. The concrete was slick with decades of accumulated slime, making purchase difficult. Behind her, Amir replaced the access panel. Then she was alone in absolute darkness except for the small flashlight beam. She pulled herself forward. 6 inches. Rest. Breathe. 6 more inches. The pipe angled downward slightly, helping gravity but also making control harder. Water trickled past her, cold and foul-smelling. Claustrophobia clawed at her mind. She was buried alive in a concrete tube, broken and helpless. No, not helpless, never helpless. Sarah focused on the light ahead, the literal and metaphorical end of the tunnel. Pull, breathe, pull, breathe. Her elbows scraped raw against the rough concrete. Her legs, dragging behind, caught on irregularities in the pipe, sending fresh waves of agony through her body. 30 feet into the pipe, she heard its shouts from above, muffled but unmistakable. They discovered her empty cell. Sarah pulled faster, desperation overriding pain. The alarm siren wailed, its sound penetrating even through the concrete. They'd be searching everywhere, checking every possible escape route. 40 feet, the pipe seemed endless. Had Amir been wrong about the distance? Then light, real light, not her flashlight but daylight streaming through the far end of the pipe. Sarah's heart soared even as her body screamed in protest. Almost there, almost free. She emerged from the drainage pipe into a ravine exactly as Amir had described. The morning sun, breaking over the mountain peaks, had never looked more beautiful. Sarah dragged herself away from the pipe opening, taking cover behind a boulder just as voices echoed from inside the compound walls above. "Check the drainage, check everywhere." Sarah didn't wait to hear more. She oriented herself using the sun and Amir's map, identifying the northward ravine. 15 kilometers. In her condition, maybe 2 days of crawling. She had water, food, and most importantly, freedom. Behind her, the compound erupted in chaos. She could hear Kadir's voice, screaming orders, demanding explanations. The thought of his rage made her smile through the pain. Then gunfire, automatic weapons, the distinctive crack of AK-47s, but also different sounds, suppressed fire, American weapons. Sarah's blood froze. That couldn't be what she thought it was. From her position in the ravine, she saw figures moving on the compound's western wall. Black tactical gear, precise movements, a four-man team executing a dynamic entry. "No," Sarah whispered. "Hawk, you idiot, you beautiful, stupid idiot." Her team had come for her. They'd launched a rescue operation, probably against direct orders, and walked into a compound that no longer held their target. They'd be slaughtered for nothing. Sarah's tactical mind raced. She was in no condition to fight, could barely move, but her team was in there, outnumbered 5-1, searching for someone who wasn't even present. Every instinct screamed at her to hide, to stick to the plan, to crawl to safety. She'd earned her escape. Her team had made their choice. But SEALs didn't abandon brothers, ever. Sarah pulled herself back toward the drainage pipe, every movement agony, every second precious. She had to warn them somehow, had to let them know she was already out. The firefight intensified. Grenades exploded. Men screamed. Sarah reached the pipe opening and cupped her hands around her mouth, projecting her voice through the tunnel with all her remaining strength. "Hawk, I'm out. Eastern Wall, I'm already out." She couldn't know if they heard her over the battle sounds. She screamed it again, until her voice went hoarse. Then movement above. A figure appeared on the eastern wall, silhouetted against the sky. Master Chief Richards scanning the ravine with tactical precision. Their eyes met across the distance. Richards' voice boomed through a radio. "Target ACQRED. EXFIL now." The team's tactics shifted instantly from rescue to escape. Smoke grenades popped. Suppressing fire laid down in coordinated bursts. Sarah watched, professional admiration mixing with terror, as her team executed a fighting retreat. Kadir's forces pursued, firing from every position. The four SEALs moved like ghosts through the smoke, covering each other, leapfrogging toward the eastern wall. Sarah positioned herself behind the boulder, the only cover available. If they made it over that wall, they'd drop right into the ravine. She might be broken, but she could still provide covering fire if needed. She checked her supplies. No weapon. Damn. The first SEAL came over the wall, Hawk, rappelling down at breakneck speed. He hit the ground, rolled, came up with his weapon ready. Saw Sarah. His face went through a dozen emotions in 1 second. "Miss me," Sarah called weakly. "You crazy." The rest was lost as another SEAL dropped beside him, then a third. Master Chief Richards came last, providing covering fire as he descended. Bullets chipped the rock above them. Kadir's forces were at the wall, firing down into the ravine. "Can you move?" Richards barked, already knowing the answer. "Not fast enough." Without hesitation, Richards scooped her up in a fireman's carry, Sarah's broken legs dangling. The pain was indescribable, but she bit down hard, refusing to scream. "Contact right," Sarah called, spotting movement on the ravine ridge. Even in Richards' arms, her training kicked in. Hawk engaged the target, his shots precise. The team moved as one organism, 3 men providing security while Richards carried Sarah, navigating the treacherous ravine terrain at a pace that should have been impossible. Behind them, Kadir's voice echoed off the rocks. "Find them. They cannot escape. Kill them all." 200 meters into the ravine, they reached a narrow passage, barely wide enough for single file. The perfect choke point. Richards set Sarah down in cover while the team took defensive positions. "This is it," Hawk said grimly. "Make our stand here or keep running." Sarah pulled herself upright against a rock, her tactical mind still functioning despite the trauma. "Keep running," she said. "I'll slow them down." "Negative," Richards said flatly. "We all leave or nobody does." "Chief." "That's an order, Lieutenant Commander." The enemy was closing fast, maybe 60 seconds out. Sarah's mind raced through options, finding none she liked. Then the beautiful sound of rotor blades. A helicopter crested the mountain ridge, unmarked but unmistakably military. Someone in the chain of command had finally authorized support, or more likely, someone had gone completely rogue. "Cavalry's here," Hawk shouted, "move." The team ran. Well, 3 of them ran while Richards carried Sarah toward the rapidly descending helicopter. Enemy fire intensified, bullets kicking up dirt around their feet. They were 20 meters from the chopper when one of the SEALs, Peterson, grunted and went down, hit in the leg. Hawk doubled back instantly, grabbing Peterson. Now both Richards and Hawk carried wounded, speed cut in half, enemy closing the distance. 10 meters. Sarah twisted in Richards' grip, looking back at their pursuers. She saw Kadir himself among them, face twisted with rage, rifle raised. 5 meters. They piled into the helicopter, hands reaching to pull them aboard. The bird lifted immediately, rotors screaming, as bullets pinged off the fuselage. Sarah caught one last glimpse of the compound, saw smoke rising from multiple fires, saw Kadir standing in the ravine, shaking his fist at the sky. Then they were up, banking hard, mountains falling away below. Inside the helicopter, medics swarmed over Sarah and Peterson. Richard sat back, chest heaving, looking at Sarah with an expression caught between relief and fury. "You were supposed to wait for rescue," he said. Sarah managed a weak smile. "SEALs don't wait, Master Chief. You taught me that." "You're impossible," says the man who launched an unauthorized rescue operation. Despite everything, the pain, the exhaustion, the impossible odds they just survived, Sarah felt something she hadn't felt in 8 days. Hope. They were alive, all of them, broken, bleeding, but alive. Kadir had learned the hardest way possible. You don't break a SEAL. You just piss them off. The helicopter banked hard, weaving through mountain passes at dangerous speeds. Kadir's forces had mobilized. Sarah could see vehicles pouring from the compound below, tracking their flight path. The pilot's voice crackled through the headsets. "We've got a problem. Surface-to-air missile warning. They've got a Stinger." "How far to the border?" Richards demanded. 12 minutes at current speed. Missiles got a 4-minute flight time if they acquire lock. Then fly faster. Sarah felt the helicopter surge forward, engine screaming. The medic working on her legs looked young, maybe fresh out of training, his hands steady despite the aircraft's violent maneuvers. "Ma'am, I need to stabilize these fractures. This is going to hurt." "Everything hurts. Do what you need to do." He injected her with something, morphine probably, but didn't wait for it to take effect before beginning to splint her legs properly. The pain was blinding, but Sarah focused on the tactical situation instead. Through the open door, she watched the terrain below, using landmarks from Amir's map to track their position. "Missile launch," the pilot screamed. The helicopter dove, dropping altitude so fast Sarah's stomach lurched. Flares deployed automatically, bright magnesium stars trailing behind them. The Stinger's heat seeker locked onto a flare instead of their engine, detonating harmlessly 200 meters away. "That's one," the pilot said grimly, "if they've got more." "Second launch," Hawk called from the door gun position. This time the pilot had no room to maneuver. They were already too low, threading through a narrow canyon. The missile streaked toward them, closing impossibly fast. Hawk opened up with the door gun, a desperate move with almost zero chance of success. Tracer rounds reached toward the incoming missile like a deadly prayer. Against all odds, one connected. The Stinger exploded prematurely, the blast wave rocking the helicopter sideways. Alarms shrieked. The pilot fought for control as they skimmed barely 50 feet above the rocky canyon floor. "Engine 1 taking damage," the co-pilot reported, "oil pressure dropping." Sarah's medical treatment forgotten, the young medic grabbed a safety strap as the helicopter shuddered violently. Through the door, she could see smoke trailing from their damaged engine. "Can we make the border?" Richards asked, his voice deadly calm. "Maybe, if they don't shoot again and this engine holds together. Big if on both counts." Below, the vehicle convoy was closing the distance, using their knowledge of mountain roads to cut angles. Sarah could see armed fighters hanging from truck beds, weapons raised. "Contact below," Peterson shouted despite his leg wound, gripping his rifle. "Gun trucks 5 o'clock." The canyon narrowed further. The pilot had no choice but to maintain course. Any turn would slam them into rock walls. They were trapped in a shooting gallery with a dying engine and an enemy who knew these mountains intimately. Gunfire erupted from the vehicles below. Bullets stitched up the helicopter's belly, sparking off metal. The young medic cried out, grabbing his shoulder where a round had found flesh. Sarah's mind raced through tactical options, finding none she liked. They were pinned, damaged, and outnumbered. The border was still 8 minutes away, assuming the damaged engine held. 8 minutes was an eternity in combat. "We need to slow them down," she said to Richards. "How? We're barely staying airborne." Sarah looked at Peterson's rifle, then at the door gun Hawk had abandoned to help with Peterson earlier. "Give me that M240. You can't even stand." "Don't need to stand to shoot." Richards understood immediately. He dragged the belt-fed machine gun to Sarah's position, setting it up so she could fire from a prone position despite her broken legs. The weapon's weight settled against her shoulder, familiar and deadly. "Magazine," she called. Hawk slapped a fresh belt into the feed tray. Sarah sighted through the door, compensating for the helicopter's movement through muscle memory and thousands of hours of training. The lead gun truck filled her sights. She fired. The M240 roared, sending 7.62 rounds downrange at 650 rounds per minute. Sarah walked her fire across the lead vehicle's windshield, saw it swerve violently, and tumble off the narrow road into a ravine. "Second truck," Richards called, feeding her ammunition. Sarah shifted aim, her core muscles screaming from holding position against the helicopter's movement. The second truck exploded in flames as her rounds found its fuel tank. The remaining vehicles fell back, seeking cover. The canyon widened slightly, giving their pilot more maneuvering room. "Engine 1's critical," the co-pilot shouted. "We're losing it." "Shut it down, switch to single-engine flight," the pilot ordered. "Boarders 4 minutes out." The helicopter slowed dramatically on one engine, altitude dropping. They were barely clearing the canyon walls now, the damaged rotor screaming in protest. Then they heard it, a sound that made every American operator's blood run cold, the distinctive whoosh of an RPG launch. "Rocket 6 o'clock." The pilot threw the helicopter into a desperate turn, but with only one engine, response was sluggish. The RPG streaked past, missing by meters, but the evasive maneuver cost them. They dropped altitude dangerously, the skids actually scraping rock as they struggled to climb. "Lost tail rotor authority," the pilot's voice cracked with stress. "We're going down, brace for impact." Sarah grabbed the nearest support strap. Through the chaos, her eyes met Richards'. The Master Chief's expression was calm, accepting. They'd faced death before. If this was how it ended, at least they'd go down fighting together. The helicopter lurched violently, spinning as the tail rotor failed completely. The world became a blur of sky and rock. Sarah heard metal tearing, felt the impact as they struck ground. Everything went black. When consciousness returned, seconds or minutes later, impossible to tell, Sarah found herself lying in dirt, still strapped into her safety harness. The helicopter had somehow stayed mostly intact despite the crash, belly landed in a flat area beside a mountain stream. "Sound off," Richard's voice cut through the ringing in her ears. Hawk okay. Peterson alive, legs worse. Pilot co-pilot's unconscious but breathing. Medic's shoulder wound functional. Everyone accounted for, miraculous. Sarah tried to move, immediately regretted it. Her legs had taken additional trauma in the crash, but she was alive. Where are we? She managed. Hawk checked their GPS, then laughed, actual laughter despite their desperate situation. 200 meters inside Pakistan. We made it. We're across the border. Kadir won't care about borders, Peterson said, already taking up a defensive position despite his wounded leg. He was right. Through the settling dust, Sarah could hear engines approaching. Kadir's convoy hadn't given up. Border or no border, he was coming to finish this. The team formed a defensive perimeter around the crashed helicopter, weapons ready. 7 Americans, 3 wounded, low on ammunition, no air support, no reinforcements, and an enemy force of 40+ closing in. Last stand, Richards said simply, checking his magazine. Make every shot count. Sarah pulled herself into position, dragging the M240 with her. Her vision swam with pain and exhaustion, but her hands remained steady on the weapon. The first truck crested the ridge 200 meters out, then another, then 5 more. Kadir's entire force committed to killing them all, international borders be damned. Hold fire until they're in effective range, Richards ordered calmly, as if they were on a training exercise. Controlled bursts, conserve ammunition. Sarah centered her breathing, finding the calm focus that had gotten her through Hell Week, through countless missions, through 8 days of captivity. If this was the end, she'd take as many of the enemy with her as possible. Kadir's voice boomed across the distance, amplified by a megaphone. Surrender the woman, the rest of you can leave. Just give me the woman. Richard's response was simple. He raised his middle finger. The enemy forces spread out, taking positions. This would be a massacre, quick and brutal. Then, cutting through the tension like salvation itself, came a new sound. Jet engines. Sarah looked up to see the most beautiful sight of her life. 2 F-16s screaming over the ridge, flying so low their wake kicked up dust. Pakistani Air Force markings gleamed in the sunlight. The jets made a show of force pass directly over Kadir's position, then circled back, weapons clearly visible on their hardpoints. The message was unmistakable. You're in Pakistani territory now. Leave or die. Simultaneously, American Humvees appeared from the opposite direction, a quick reaction force that must have been staged at the border, waiting for exactly this situation. Kadir stood in his truck bed, staring at the American team with pure hatred. For a long moment, Sarah thought he might attack anyway, suicide mission or not. Then he spat on the ground and screamed orders. His convoy turned around, disappearing back across the border into Afghanistan. The QRF reached the crashed helicopter 90 seconds later. Fresh medics swarmed the wounded. A colonel Sarah didn't recognize approached Richards. Master Chief, you have any idea how much paperwork this is going to generate? No, sir, don't care either, sir. The colonel looked at Sarah, then at the crashed helicopter, then at the team of battered but defiant SEALs. Finally, he shook his head with something that might have been admiration. Get them on the next bird to Bagram. Medical priority. We'll sort out the shitstorm later. As they loaded Sarah onto a stretcher, she caught one last glimpse of the mountains where Kadir's compound lay. Somewhere in those peaks, 3 brave boys were making their own escape. She hoped Amir and his friends found safety. We did it, Hawk said quietly, walking beside her stretcher. Actually pulled it off. Sarah smiled through the pain, never doubted it for a second. Liar. Yeah, complete liar. They loaded into a medevac helicopter, this one intact and properly functioning. As they lifted off, Sarah allowed herself to finally relax. The mission was over. She'd survived. They'd all survived. And somewhere in those mountains, Kadir was learning a lesson that would haunt him forever. You don't break seals. You just make them angrier. 6 months later. Lieutenant Commander Sarah Razor Chen stood at attention in the courtyard of Naval Special Warfare Command, Coronado, California. Stood. The word felt miraculous even now. Her legs, reconstructed with 16 titanium screws, 3 plates, and more surgical pins than she could count, trembled slightly under her weight. The cane in her right hand provided necessary support, but the fact that she stood at all defied every medical prediction made in those first desperate days at Bagram. The Navy Cross gleamed against her dress uniform, recently pinned there by the Admiral himself. Around her, the assembled crowd, SEALs, officers, families, stood in respectful silence. Master Chief Richard stood to her right, Hawk to her left, both in their dress whites. Peterson sat in the front row, his own leg still healing but improving daily. The Admiral's speech washed over her. Extraordinary valor, dedication beyond measure, exemplifying the finest traditions. Sarah barely heard it. Her mind kept drifting to the hospital room where she'd woken up after the first surgery, doctors explaining gently that her combat career was finished. The tears she'd cried alone that night. The desperate physical therapy sessions where inch-by-inch progress felt like miles. But also the moment, 3 months in, when she'd taken her first unassisted step. The look on Richard's face when she'd walked into his office without crutches to accept this new assignment. The letter from Amir, smuggled through Red Cross channels, confirming he and Jamal and Omar had reached safety, were living with his cousin's family, and that Omar was actually applying to university. Lieutenant Commander Chen has agreed to join our training cadre, the Admiral continued, pulling Sarah back to the present. She will be instrumental in developing our SEER curriculum and instructing the next generation of naval special warfare operators. Applause rippled through the crowd. Sarah forced herself not to cry. This wasn't the ending she'd envisioned for her career. She'd planned on 20 years of active duty, leading teams, executing missions, not teaching, not standing on the sidelines while others deployed. But as she looked out at the Bud-S candidates assembled in formation, young, eager, terrified faces, something shifted in her perspective. These weren't the sidelines. This was a different kind of front line. The ceremony concluded. Well-wishers surrounded her, shaking hands, offering congratulations. Sarah smiled and thanked them, playing her part. When the crowd finally thinned, Richards approached with an amused expression. "You hate this, don't you?" he said bluntly. "The ceremony or the desk job?" "Both." Sarah laughed despite herself. "That obvious." "To someone who knows you, yeah." Richard's expression softened. "For what it's worth, the training pipeline needs you. These kids coming through Bud-S now, they're good, but they need to learn from someone who's actually been there. Someone who survived the worst and came back stronger." "Came back broken, you mean?" "Came back," Richards emphasized. "That's what matters. You didn't quit. You never quit." Before Sarah could respond, a voice called from across the courtyard. "Excuse me, Commander Chen." Sarah turned to see a young man approaching, early 20s, clean-cut, wearing civilian clothes but carrying himself with unmistakable military bearing. It took her a moment to recognize him without the fear and dirt. Amir. "Amir," Sarah's voice cracked with emotion. "You're here how?" "Special visa. Your Master Chief Richards he helped arrange." Amir's English had improved dramatically. "I am at University of California now, studying international relations, but I had to come today, had to see you receive this honor." They embraced carefully, mindful of Sarah's still healing injuries. When they separated, both had tears in their eyes. "Jamal and Omar?" Sarah asked. "Safe, happy. Omar got accepted to engineering program in Islamabad. Jamal is teaching at school in my cousin's village. We survived, Commander, because of you." "Because of all of us," Sarah corrected. "You saved my life just as much as I saved yours." Amir smiled, then his expression turned serious. Kadir. Sarah's jaw tightened. Still operating, but he's been designated a high-value target. It's only a matter of time. Good, the single word carried years of pain and anger. Then Amir brightened. I brought something from Omar. He handed Sarah an envelope. Inside was a photograph, 3 young men at a university campus smiling at the camera. On the back, in careful English, "Thank you for giving us a future. We will make you proud. Omar Jamal Amir." Sarah tucked the photo carefully into her uniform pocket, right over her heart. The next morning, Sarah stood before her first Bud S class. 200 candidates, week 1 of training, staring at her with mixture of curiosity and skepticism. She could read their thoughts. A woman instructor, visibly injured, leaning on a cane. Some faces showed doubt. Sarah let the silence stretch, letting them wonder, letting their assumptions build. Then she spoke. "My name is Lieutenant Commander Sarah Chen. 6 months ago, I was captured by enemy forces in Afghanistan. They broke both my legs, shattered them completely. The lead insurgent, a warlord named Kadir, told me I was helpless. That women didn't belong among warriors, that I would break under pressure." She paused, letting it sink in. He was wrong. I picked the lock on my cell. I crawled through a drainage pipe with compound fractures in both legs. I escaped his compound and made it to friendly territory. And when my rescue team was pinned down by superior forces, I provided covering fire from a helicopter despite being unable to walk. Sarah began packing slowly, deliberately, the cane clicking on concrete with each step. "This training will break you, not might will. It will find every weakness, every doubt, every fear you've ever had. Some of you will quit today, more will quit tomorrow. By Hell Week, half of you will be gone." She stopped, meeting their eyes. "But here's what I learned in that cave with broken bones and no hope of rescue. Being a SEAL isn't about physical perfection. It's not about being the strongest or the fastest. It's about what happens when everything goes wrong. When you're hurt, alone, and surrounded by enemies. When quitting would be easier than breathing." Sarah tapped her cane against the ground. "They broke my legs. They didn't break what made me a SEAL. That comes from here," she pointed to her head, "and here," she pointed to her heart. "Your body will fail you, pain will overwhelm you, but your mind and your will, those are unbreakable unless you allow it." She surveyed the class, seeing the doubt beginning to transform into something else. Respect, understanding. "I can't run with you anymore, can't jump from aircraft or dive with teams, but I can teach you the most important lesson I ever learned. The only easy day was yesterday, and tomorrow will test you in ways you cannot imagine. But you can survive it. You can overcome it, as long as you never, ever quit." Sarah let the words hang in the air. So when you're in that cold ocean tonight, when every muscle screams and your mind begs you to ring that bell, remember this. A woman with 2 broken legs escaped from enemy captivity by sheer will. If I can do that, you can survive 1 night of training. She smiled, a predator's smile. "Now drop and give me 50. Let's see what you're made of." As the class hit the ground, Sarah caught sight of Richards watching from the training office window. He nodded once, approval, recognition, respect. Sarah nodded back. Her war wasn't over, it had just evolved. She would forge the next generation of warriors, would teach them that true strength came from within, would ensure that every SEAL who graduated understood that obstacles were just problems waiting for solutions. That evening, Sarah sat in her apartment, looking at Amir's photograph alongside her Navy Cross. 2 symbols of the same truth. Survival wasn't about avoiding damage. It was about refusing to stay down. Her phone buzzed, a message from Hawk. "Heard your speech. Those kids don't know it yet, but they just met their hardest instructor. Proud of you, Razor." Sarah smiled, typing back. "They'll learn just like we did." She stood slowly, carefully, but without the cane, and walked to her window. Outside, the sun set over Coronado, painting the sky in shades of orange and red. Somewhere in those waters, Bud S candidates were suffering through their first night of training, learning what they were made of. Tomorrow she'd push them harder. Because that's what SEALs did. They pushed through impossible odds. They turned pain into power. They transformed broken bones into unbreakable spirits. Kadir had tried to break her. Instead, he'd forged something stronger. And now, that strength would be passed to the next generation. Sarah Razor Chen, survivor warrior instructor, smiled at the setting sun. The fight continued. It always would. And she'd never been more ready. The end.